I want you to try something for me. Right now, wherever you are, unless you're driving, in which case, please keep your eyes on the road. But if you can, just close your eyes for a second.
Okay, doing it. Eyes closed.
Now just listen.
That
I mean,
part.
really listen. Try to strip away the meaning of the sounds around you. Forget that the hum is a computer fan or that distant roar is traffic. Just focus on the raw sensation. What are you actually experiencing?
It's an interesting frame because we usually think of hearing as something almost abstract. It's music, it's language.
Right, it's information.
But when you put it that way, at its absolute core, it's just mechanical. It's vibration.
Exactly. It isn't a chemical floating through the air like when you smell something. It isn't a photon of light hitting a receptor like vision.
Yeah.
It is, and this is the key, it is touch. It's touch at a distance.
That is a very physical, very grounded way of putting it.
But it's the truth, isn't it? The only reason you can hear my voice right now is because molecules of air are physically, literally pushing against your eardrum. They're setting off this incredible chain reaction of tiny bones, fluids, and microscopic hairs that are all dancing inside a locked chamber in your skull.
And that dance is, I mean, it's unbelievably precise. We're diving into the physiology of hearing and equilibrium today. This is Physio 11, and the thing that always gets me about this system is just the sheer mechanical sensitivity of it all.
Sensitivity feels like, I don't know, massive understatement. I was reading to our main sources for this deep dive. We've got the usual titans, Ganong's Review of Medical Physiology, and the Guyton and Hull textbook of medical physiology.
Yeah.
And I hit a statistic that just completely broke my brain.
I think I know the one you're talking about. Does it involve a hydrogen atom?
The hydrogen atom, yes. Ganong mentions that the human ear can reliably detect movements of the eardrum that are as small as the diameter of a single hydrogen atom. I mean, how is that even possible? This is biological tissue we're talking about. It's wet, it's squishy, it's not some hypersensitive instrument in a vacuum-sealed physics lab.
It's a real testament to the biological engineering, you know? And it creates this amazing paradox.
What kind of paradox?
The paradox of dynamic range. You have this system that is sensitive enough to detect that atomic scale movement, to literally hear a pin drop, but it's also robust enough to handle the roar of a jet engine right next to you.
Okay, what's the difference there in terms of energy?
We're talking about an energy difference of about 1 trillion to 1.
A trillion.
Yes. If you tried to build a microphone with that kind of sensitivity, it would probably just shatter the second someone sneezed too close to it.
So, okay, that's our mission for today. We have to unpack this mechanical magic. We need to figure out how the body builds a sensor that is somehow both exquisitely delicate and incredibly tough.
And we're going to do it by tracing the entire journey of a sound wave, right from the air outside all the way into the brain. And then, and this part is just as important, we're going to pivot to what I call the silent sense.
Balance. Equilibrium.
Exactly, because it's the same organ deep inside your skull using the exact same fundamental technology that also keeps you from falling flat on your face when you bend over to tie your shoe. Hearing and balance are siblings. They're both about mechanotransduction.
So before we jump into the physics, let's just quickly set the stage with our guides.
Yeah.
How are we using the two big texts today?
Well, Guyton is going to be our systems engineer. He's the one giving us the big picture physics, the fluid dynamics, these beautiful concepts like impedance matching and the traveling wave. He's all about the mechanics.
And Ganong.
Ganong is our cellular and molecular biologist. He's the one who takes us down to the microscopic level, the ion channels, the genetic components, the specific clinical diseases. He gives us that incredible precision.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning then. Part 1, the physics of entry. So I'm in a room, someone is talking, sound waves are moving through the air, they hit my outer ear. What is the first immediate physical problem that evolution has to solve?
The problem is the medium. The sound is traveling through air, which is, it's light, it's compressible, it has very low density. But the actual receptor cells, the little hairs that do the hearing, they live inside the cochlea.
And the cochlea is filled with fluid.
Correct. It's a fluid-filled fortress, basically.
So air to fluid, why is that such a big deal? I mean, sound can travel through walls, can't it?
Think of it this way. Have you ever been swimming in a pool, you go underwater, and someone on the deck shouts your name?
Yeah, it sounds really muffled, like it's a million miles away.
Right. And that's not just because there's water in your ears. It's a fundamental problem of physics. When sound waves traveling in air hit a fluid surface, like the top of a swimming pool, they don't just go in, they bounce.
They reflect off the surface.
The vast majority of the energy does, yes. We're talking about 99.9% of the sound energy being reflected away.
Wait, hang on. 99.9%. That seems incredibly inefficient. Why does that happen?
It all comes down to something called impedance. It's basically the resistance to movement. Air has very low impedance. It's easy to move. Water has very high impedance. It has a lot of inertia. Imagine you're standing in front of a giant concrete wall and you throw a ping pong ball at it.
It's just going to bounce right back at me.
Exactly. The wall doesn't absorb the energy because its impedance is so much higher than the ball's. That's precisely what happens when a sound wave in air tries to enter the fluid of the inner ear. The fluid is the concrete wall.
So if our ears were just simple holes in our head that led straight to that fluid-filled cochlea, we would be, for all practical purposes, deaf.
We'd lose about 30 decibels of hearing right off the bat. A normal conversation would be a faint whisper. We'd be living in a world of muffled silence.
So evolution needed a solution. It had to invent a tool to force that sound energy into the fluid.
It did. It had to solve what physicists call the impedance matching problem. It needed to match the low resistance of the air to the high resistance of the fluid.
And this is where the middle ear finally comes into play. The eardrum and those three tiny bones we all had to memorize in school. The malleus, insipes, and stapes.
Or hammer, anvil, and stirrup, as they're often called.
Right. Now, I always just picture them as a simple bridge, just connecting the eardrum to the inner ear. But Guyton makes a huge deal about them being an amplifier.
Oh, they're much more than a bridge. They're a beautiful little machine. Guyton breaks their function down into two key mechanical advantages. The first one is a fairly straightforward lever system.
A lever.
Yeah, the way the ossicles, those bones, are connected and pivot, they act like a class 2 lever. They increase the force of the vibration by a factor of about 1.3.
Okay, I'm going to push back a little on that. 1.3 times? That doesn't sound like a game changer. That's a pretty modest upgrade.
You're right to be skeptical. The lever is the minor player here. It helps, but it's not what solves that 99.9% energy loss problem. The real magic is what Guyton calls the surface area ratio.
Okay, break that down for us.
Think about a thumbtack. You've got the wide, flat head that you push with your thumb, and then you've got the tiny, sharp point.
Right.
If you just press your thumb against a wooden board with a certain amount of force, nothing much happens. The force is all spread out. But if you press that thumbtack into the board with the exact same thumb force...
It sinks right in.
Yes.
Because all that force is concentrated onto that tiny little point.
Exactly. Pressure equals force divided by area. The ear does the exact same thing. The tympanic membrane, the eardrum, that's the head of the thumbtack, it has a relatively large surface area, about 55 square millimeters, and it collects all that sound energy from the air.
Like a big satellite dish.
A perfect analogy. Then it funnels all that collected force down that chain of bones to the footplate of the stapes, which presses on the inner ear. And that footplate is the point of the thumbtack. It's tiny, only about 3.2 square millimeters.
So you're taking the force from 55 square millimeters and cramming it all into a space of 3.2.
Exactly. You do the math, that's a 17-fold difference in area.
Okay, no, that's a number. That's significant.
And when you multiply that 17-fold concentration of force by the 1.3 from the lever action, you get a total amplification of the force of about 22 times.
And that's enough to push on that concrete wall.
That 22-fold increase is just enough to overcome the inertia of the cochlear fluid. It actually moves the fluid instead of just bouncing off it. It turns the ping pong ball into a battering ram.
That is just so elegant. It's pure mechanics. No electricity, no fancy chemistry yet. Just simple leverage and hydraulics.
And this has very real clinical meaning. If you understand this mechanism, you can understand a big part of conductive hearing loss, especially a condition called otosclerosis.
Which sounds like hardening of the ear. Sclerosis means hardening, right?
Precisely. In this condition, the stapes bone can actually become fused or calcified to the oval window it's supposed to push on.
So the battering ram gets glued in place. It can't move.
Exactly. If it can't piston back and forth, you lose the lever, you lose that massive surface area advantage, you lose the impedance matching.
And you're right back to the shouting at the swimming pool scenario.
You are. Your hearing drops by about 15 to 20 decibels. You've lost your mechanical advantage. You can still hear loud sounds that are strong enough to vibrate your whole skull, but you've lost all the delicate, quiet stuff.
Now, speaking of mechanics, there has to be a safety feature built in here, doesn't there? Because if I'm amplifying everything by 22 times, what happens when I walk past a jackhammer or stand next to the speakers at a concert? Don't I just blow up my inner ear?
Evolution thought of that. There's a protection mechanism called the attenuation reflex. It involves two of the tiniest muscles in the human body, right there in the middle ear, the tensor tympani and the stapedius.
I love that we have muscles inside our ears. It's such a weird thought.
They are tiny, but they're strong and fast. When a dangerously loud sound hits the ear, a reflex loop is triggered. Within about 40 to 80 milliseconds, these muscles contract. The tensor tympani pulls the malleus inward, and the stapedius pulls the stapes outward.
So they're pulling it against each other. They're fighting.
Yes. Imagine two people pulling on opposite ends of a rope. The rope goes rigid. These muscles do the same thing to the acicula chain of bones. They lock it up, make it stiff, and prevent the bones from swinging so wildly. It's like putting the brakes on the whole system.
So it literally dampens the vibration before it can do damage to the delicate structures in the cochlea.
It can reduce the intensity of low-frequency sounds by 30 to 40 decibels. That's a huge reduction. That's the difference between a painful shout and a normal conversation.
But you mentioned a delay, 40 to 80 milliseconds.
And that's the Achilles heel of the system. It's a neural reflex, which means the signal has to go to the brainstem and back out to the muscle. It takes time. So for a sudden explosive sound like a gunshot or a firecracker, the reflex is just too slow. The damaging wave has already passed through before the muscles even get the message to contract.
So it's great for the sustained roar of a jet engine, but totally useless against a single pistol shot.
Correct. But there's a second and maybe even more fascinating function to this reflex. It's not just for protection, it's for clarity.
Clarity. How does making things quieter make them clearer? That sounds backwards.
Guyton points out that this reflex is most effective at dampening low-frequency sounds. Now, think about the sounds your own body makes. When you talk, or especially when you chew, you generate a lot of low-frequency vibration that conducts directly through your skull to your ear.
Oh, right. The eating potato chips effect. When you're eating something crunchy, it sounds deafening inside your own head, but nobody else really hears it that loudly.
Exactly. If you didn't have this attenuation reflex, the sound of your own voice and your own chewing would constantly be drowning out the world. By clamping down on those low frequencies, your ear is effectively masking the background noise of you being you.
So it lets you hear the higher frequency sounds, like someone else's speech, more clearly against your own internal noise.
Precisely. It's like a built-in audio engineer automatically turning down the bass on your own body so you can hear the important stuff.
That is wild. It's an active equalizer. Okay, so we've made it through the middle ear. We've amplified the signal. We've matched the impedance. We put the brakes on if it's too loud. The stapes is now pushing on the oval window. We are officially entering the inner ear. The cochlea.
The snail shell.
I always try to picture it as a snail shell, but that's a hard shape to visualize mechanically.
It's much easier if you mentally unroll it. Imagine taking that coiled tube and just stretching it out into a straight line. It's about 35 millimeters long.
So roughly an inch and a half.
Right, and if you took a cross-section of this unrolled tube, you'd see it's divided into 3 separate chambers stacked on top of each other like a long, thin, triple-decker sandwich.
I like a food analogy. Walk me through the sandwich layers.
Okay, the top slice of bread is the scala vestibuli. The bottom slice of bread is the scala tympani. These two are connected at the far end, and they're filled with a fluid called perilymph, which is basically your standard issue body fluid, like plasma.
And the filling in the middle.
That's the scala media. This is the VIP section. This is where all the important stuff lives. And it's separated from the top chamber by a very thin membrane called Reisner's membrane, and from the bottom by the all-important basilar membrane.
The basilar membrane. Okay, this seems to be the star of the show in Guyton's whole explanation.
It really is. This is the physical substrate for the traveling wave theory of hearing.
I love this concept because before reading this, I kind of assumed the whole inner ear just vibrated at once, like when you hit a drum.
Right.
But that's not what happens at all.
No, it's far more elegant than that. And you're right, that drum idea is what early scientists thought for a long time. But the biology is smarter. The basilar membrane isn't uniform along its length. It changes its physical properties from the base, the part near the stapes, all the way to the apex, the very tip of the snail shell.
Guyton uses the analogy of a harp, which I found helpful. Although I want to be careful because a harp has distinct separate strings, and this is a continuous membrane.
It's a good starting point, though. The mechanical properties are very similar. Near the base, where the sound first enters, the fibers inside the membrane are short, they're stiff, and they're packed tightly together. Just like the short, tight strings on a harp that play the high notes.
And at the far end, the apex.
At the apex, the fibers are long, they're floppy, and they're much looser, like the long, thick strings that play the low bass notes on a harp.
So different parts of this single membrane are physically tuned to want to vibrate at different frequencies.
Precisely. They each have a different natural resonant frequency. So when the stapes pushes on the fluid, it doesn't just shake everything at once. It sends a pressure wave rippling down the length of the cochlea. This is the traveling wave.
Guyton describes this wave motion very specifically. I want to make sure I'm picturing it right. It's not like a wave on the ocean that travels all the way to the beach, is it?
It's a bit different. A better analogy might be snapping a heavy rope or a whip. You flick your wrist and you see a wave, a bump, travel down the length of the rope.
Okay, I can see that.
Now imagine that rope isn't uniform. Imagine it starts out very thin and taut near your hand, but it gets progressively thicker and floppier toward the end.
Okay, so I snap it.
The wave travels really fast down the tight, thin part, but as it moves into the looser, heavier sections, it starts to slow down. The wave actually grows in height, it gets bigger, and then at one very specific spot, the spot where the rope's properties perfectly match the wave's frequency, it basically crashes and dies out. It dissipates all its energy right there and never reaches the very end of the rope.
So the wave physically sorts itself. It travels along the membrane until it finds the one address that's tuned for its specific frequency, and that's where it parks itself.
A perfect way to put it. If a high-frequency sound comes in, a high-pitched whistle, the wave hits those short, stiff fibers right at the base, creates a big vibration right there, and dies out almost immediately. If it's a low bass note, that wave travels all the way up the cochlea, ignoring all the stiff stuff, until it finds those long, floppy fibers at the apex that resonate with it.
So the ear is doing Fourier analysis mechanically. It's taking a complex sound, like an orchestra playing, and breaking it down into its component frequencies by location. High C goes here, middle G goes there, low E goes way over there.
This is called the place principle, or tonotopic mapping, and it's fundamental. The brain knows what pitch it's hearing, not based on how the nerves are firing, but by which nerves are firing. The brain just says, oh, the signal is coming from nerves at the base of the cochlea. Must be a high pitch.
That seems incredibly clever and robust. But Ganong adds a little anatomical detail here, the helicotrema. That's just a great word.
It is a great word. It means the hole in the spiral. Remember we said the top and bottom chambers, the ones with perilymph, are like two slices of bread? Well, at the very tip of the cochlea, there's a little hole that connects them. That's the helicotrema.
Why do you need a connection at the end? A pressure release valve.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
For very, very low frequency sounds, we're talking below 20 hertz, things you feel more than hear, or even just slow pressure changes, the fluid can just flow through that little hole from the top chamber to the bottom. It equalizes the pressure without vibrating the basilar membrane at all.
So when I go up in an elevator and the air pressure changes, I don't hear a deafeningly low-pitched boom.
Exactly. The fluid just gently shifts through the helicotrema and balances out. It filters out the noise of simple barometric pressure changes.
Brilliant design. Okay, so we have the mechanical sorting. The traveling wave has found its spot and is making the basilar membrane vibrate. Now we have to turn that physical vibration into an electrical signal. We need to flip the switch. This has to be the organ of Corti.
The battery and the switch. And this is where we really need to shift our focus to Ganong and the beautiful molecular biology he describes.
So set the scene. We are now inside the scala media, the filling of the sandwich.
Yes. And I want to pause on the fluid in here for a moment, the endolymph. Because Ganong really emphasizes it, and it's biologically bizarre. It's very high in potassium.
Right. And most fluid outside of cells is high in sodium, low in potassium. So this is backwards.
It's completely backwards from the rest of the body. And the body has to work really hard to maintain this weird high potassium environment.
So why go to all that trouble? Why flip the script?
It's all about creating an electrical battery. The body uses a structure on the side wall called the stria vascularis to actively pump potassium into the endolymph. This makes the endolymph have a very high positive electrical charge, about plus 80 millivolts.
Okay, so the fluid is positively charged.
Meanwhile, the inside of the hair cells, the receptor cells, has a typical negative charge, about negative 70 millivolts.
So you have a massive difference. Plus 80 outside, negative 70 inside. That's a 150 millivolt gradient across the top of the cell.
It's a huge electrical potential. It's like having a bowstring pulled taut, 204/7. The cell is primed. It's sitting on a powder keg of electrical energy, just waiting for a spark. It's built for incredible speed and sensitivity.
So maintaining this battery must be metabolically expensive.
Hugely expensive. The stria vascularis is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the body. It's burning through ATP constantly just to keep that pump going, which is also why our hearing is so vulnerable to things that disrupt blood flow.
Got it. The battery's charged, now we need the trigger. The hair cells and their stereocilia.
These aren't like the hair on your head. They're incredibly rigid microscopic rods made of actin, and they're arranged in neat rows like the pipes of a pipe organ from short to tall.
And this is the part that just seems like science fiction.
The
They are literally tied together with little strings.
the tip links, it's a perfect name. It's a tiny, springy protein filament that connects the very tip of one of the shorter hairs to the side of the taller hair right next to it.
Like a tiny little rope.
Exactly. And that little rope is physically connected to a trapdoor, a mechanically gated ion channel.
Okay, walk me through the event. The basilar membrane vibrates up, the hair cells get pushed and they tilt. What happens to the little rope?
When the vibration pushes the bundle of hairs toward the tallest one, the hairs pivot. This motion puts tension on that tiny rope. It stretches it taut.
It pulls on it.
And because the rope is attached to the trap door, it physically yanks the ion channel open. This is direct mechanical action. There's no second messenger, no chemical delay. It's instantaneous.
Pull the string, the door opens.
And the second that door opens, because of that massive 150 millivolt battery we talked about, potassium ions flood into the cell like water through a burst dam.
Boom. Depolarization.
Instant depolarization. That, in turn, opens voltage-gated calcium channels at the base of the cell. Calcium rushes in. That triggers the release of glutamate, and the auditory nerve fires. The brain has just heard a sound.
It's so beautifully direct. But what happens when the vibration goes the other way?
If the hairs bend in the opposite direction, toward the short side, the rope goes slack. The springiness of the trapdoor protein makes it snap shut. The current of potassium stops immediately.
So it's a perfect direction-sensitive on-off switch.
But Ganong adds one more layer of mind-blowing complexity. He calls it the adaptation motor.
An adaptation motor.
Imagine you're listening to a continuous droning sound. The hairs are held in that bent-on position. To prevent the cell from just firing constantly and becoming fatigued, a tiny molecular motor made of myosin inside the hair actually starts to walk down the side of the hair, sliding the anchor point of the tip link downward.
Wait, it moves the attachment point of the rope.
It does. By sliding the anchor down, it relieves the tension on the rope, which allows the trapdoor to close even though the hair is still physically bent. It recalibrates the system's sensitivity on the fly.
That is just. It's molecular engineering of the highest order. It's a self-resetting switch.
It allows the ear to ignore a constant background hum and remain exquisitely sensitive to any new changes in sound.
Now, we have to talk about the hair cells themselves, because there are two distinct types, and their jobs are totally different. We have the inner hair cells and the outer hair cells.
Right, and if you just look at the numbers, it's very confusing at first. You have about 3,500 inner hair cells arranged in a single row, and then you have about 12,000 outer hair cells in 3 or 4 rows.
So you'd naturally think the outer cells are the main players. They outnumber the inners by more than 3 to 1.
That's the logical assumption. But then you look at the wiring diagram, and it's the complete opposite. About 90 to 95% of all the nerve fibers in the auditory nerve connect to the inner hair cells.
Hold on, say that again. 95% of the outgoing information comes from that one single row of cells.
That's what the anatomy shows us, yes.
That makes absolutely no sense. Why would evolution build 12,000 of these outer cells, the vast majority of the sensory real estate, and then basically not hook them up to the main line out to the brain? It seems like a colossal waste.
It looks completely inefficient on paper, I agree, but this is where we discover the cochlear amplifier. Those 12,000 outer hair cells, it turns out, aren't primarily listeners. They're motors.
They're motors.
They contain a unique motor protein called prestin. When these outer hair cells get stimulated and depolarize, they don't just release a neurotransmitter, they physically change their shape. They contract and elongate at incredible speeds. They dance.
So they're moving.
They're pumping. By contracting and expanding in perfect time with the incoming sound wave, they physically grab onto the basilar membrane and add energy to its vibration. They amplify it.
So they take the small passive vibration from the traveling wave and they make it much bigger and much sharper. Without the outer hair cells, the peak of the traveling wave would be low and broad. It would be a mushy signal. The outer hair cells actively sharpen that peak, allowing us to have incredible frequency discrimination to tell the difference between two very similar notes.
So that's the cochlear tuning I've read about.
That's it. And clinically, this is huge. There are certain antibiotics, like gentamicin, that are toxic specifically to outer hair cells. If you lose them, you don't go completely deaf, but you lose about 30 to 40 decibels of sensitivity, and more importantly, everything sounds muddy and indistinct.
Yeah.
You lose the ability to pick a voice out of a noisy room.
Because you've lost your active amplifier. You're back to just the passive, unsharpened vibration.
You've got it.
This also brings up a fascinating point about the brain talking back to the ear, the olivocochlear bundle.
Ah, the efferent pathways. Yes. We always think of signals going from the ear to the brain, but the brain sends a massive bundle of nerves back to the cochlea, specifically to the outer hair cells.
And what's it telling them to do? To quiet down? Essentially, yes. The brain can send inhibitory signals to the outer hair cells, telling them to stop amplifying so much. It turns down the gain. This is thought to be a key part of how we focus our auditory attention, how we filter out background noise to listen to one person talking. It's the brain saying, okay, I'm trying to concentrate, stop vibrating so much.
It's amazing. Hearing isn't just a passive reception of data. It's an active, ongoing negotiation between the brain and the ear.
It's a constant two-way street.
So we've generated the signal. The inner hair cell has fired its message. Now we're in part 4. Neural coding. How does the brain make sense of all these electrical blips? How do I know the difference between a high pitch and a low pitch, or a loud sound and a quiet one?
Well, for pitch, we've already covered the main mechanism, which is the place principle.
Right. The signal is coming from nerve fiber #200 at the base of the cochlea. That must be a high C.
Exactly. But there's a slight problem with that. For very, very low frequencies, the peak of the traveling wave at the apex of the cochlea gets a bit broad and sloppy. The place coding isn't as precise.
So how do we tell the difference between a low rumble and a really low rumble?
We use a different strategy, the volley principle. For sounds below about 200 hertz, the neurons can actually fire in perfect sync with the peaks of the sound wave.
It's called phase locking.
Yes. If the sound wave has a frequency of 100 hertz, the nerve fires 100 times per second. The brain just has to count the pulses. I'm getting 100 pulses per second from this group of fibers, must be a 100 hertz tone.
But individual neurons have a speed limit, right? There's a refractory period. They can only fire so fast.
Exactly. A single neuron can't fire 4,000 times a second. That's why for higher frequencies, the volley principle breaks down, and we have to rely entirely on the place principle.
Got it. So pitch is mostly place, with a little bit of timing for the low stuff. What about loudness? This seems like it should be simpler. Louder sound, bigger vibration, so the neurons just fire faster.
That's part of it, for sure. Increased firing rate is one code for loudness. But think about the numbers again. If a sound gets 1 trillion times more energetic, your neurons can't fire 1 trillion times faster.
They'd melt.
They would. So the brain uses a second code, spatial summation, or recruitment. Remember the traveling wave?
Yep.
A very quiet sound will only vibrate a tiny specific spot on the membrane, activating just a few hair cells. If you make that same sound louder, it vibrates that spot harder, but the vibration also spreads out and starts to move the neighboring areas of the membrane as well. The wave gets broader.
So a loud sound recruits more neurons into the activity.
Precisely. The brain sees a wider band of the auditory nerve light up and interprets that as louder.
And Guyton makes a big point about the power law here.
This is a crucial survival mechanism. The ear compresses the auditory world. It operates on a logarithmic scale, not a linear one.
Which is why we use the decibel scale, right?
That's exactly why. A 10-fold increase in the physical energy of a sound is perceived by our brain as only a 2-fold increase in loudness. This massive compression is what allows us to have that 1,000,000,000,000 dynamic range. We can hear a pin drop without being completely incapacitated by a thunderclap.
It's just brilliant data compression. Okay, so we know what the sound is and how big it is. Now, the final piece. How do we know where it is? Sound localization.
This is one of my favorite bits of neuroscience because it involves some seriously high-speed computation in the brainstem, and it all depends on the simple fact that you have 2 ears with a head in between them.
Okay, so how does that work?
It depends on the frequency. For low frequencies, sounds below about 3,000 hertz. The brain uses time lag.
The delay in arrival time between the 2 ears.
If a sound comes from your left, it's going to hit your left eardrum a tiny fraction of a millisecond before it gets to your right eardrum.
And how small a fraction are we talking about?
It's unbelievably small. There's a nucleus in your brainstem called the medial superior olive that is wired to detect time differences as small as 20 microseconds.
20 millionths of a second. That is absurdly fast. It's faster than the duration of a single nerve spike.
It's hardwired as a coincidence detector. It has neurons that will only fire when they get an input from the left ear and the right ear at the exact same moment. By having a series of these with different delay lines, it can pinpoint the time difference.
So that works for low, long wavelength sounds. What about high-pitched sounds?
For high frequencies, the waves are too short and fast for the time lag to be a reliable cue. But something else happens with high frequencies. Your head casts a sound shadow.
Meaning my big head physically blocks the sound.
It does. A high-frequency sound coming from your left will be physically louder in your left ear than in your right ear because your head gets in the way. This is intensity difference. Another brainstem nucleus, the lateral superior olive, simply compares the volume. Louder in the left, quieter in the right, must be coming from the left.
So time lag for the bass, volume difference for the treble.
A pretty good summary, yes.
But wait a minute. That all works for telling left from right. But what about up versus down? If a mosquito is buzzing directly above my head, it's the same distance from both ears. There's no time lag, no intensity difference.
This brings us back to the pinna, that funny-shaped, crinkly piece of cartilage on the side of your head.
I always just figured that was for catching sound, like a funnel.
It is a funnel, but it's a very specifically shaped filtering funnel. The unique folds and ridges of your outer ear reflect the sound waves in complex ways before they enter the ear canal, and a sound coming from above will bounce off those ridges differently than a sound coming from below.
So it actually changes the quality, the timbre of the sound.
It introduces tiny echoes and cancellations, what are called spectral notches. It subtly colors the sound, and your brain learns from experience that this specific pattern of coloration means the sound is coming from above.
Which is why, if you wear earmuffs, or even just weirdly shaped headphones, your ability to tell up from down gets all confused.
It absolutely does.
Okay, we have thoroughly covered hearing. But we promised equilibrium, too. And you said at the start it's the same basic technology.
It is. We're still in the inner ear, in a structure right next door to the cochlea called the vestibular labyrinth. And we're still using hair cells that respond to being bent.
The balance center. Looking at the anatomy here, the geometry is just beautiful.
It's incredibly elegant. You have two main types of sensors in there, the semicircular canals and the otolith organs.
Let's start with the semicircular canals. There are 3 of them on each side.
Then why 3?
For the 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z. Pitch, roll, and yaw. Shaking your head yes, tilting your head side to side, and shaking your head no.
Exactly. We live and move in a 3-dimensional world, so we need a rotation sensor for each axis. But the critical part that Guyton emphasizes is that they work in pairs.
What do you mean, paired?
You have a horizontal canal on the left side of your head and a horizontal canal on the right. They are wired together in a push-pull arrangement.
Explain push-pull.
Think about the fluid inside those canals. When you turn your head to the left, the fluid in the left horizontal canal gets pushed in a direction that excites its hair cells. The firing rate from the left side goes up.
Okay, so left side says go.
But on the right side, because your head is turning away from it, the fluid moves in the opposite direction relative to its hair cells. This inhibits them. The firing rate from the right side goes down.
So right side says stop.
Exactly. And the brain is constantly comparing the two signals. It says left side is shouting, right side is whispering. Therefore, we must be turning to the left.
It's a differential signal, which is much more precise than a single absolute one.
Yes. And this is why it's so devastating when it breaks. If you get a virus that knocks out your left vestibular nerve, for example, suddenly your brain is hearing right side is normal, left side is totally silent.
And it interprets that huge difference as a violent spin to the right.
Even if you were lying perfectly still in bed. That is the intense, debilitating vertigo of vestibular neuritis. The push-pull system is broken.
That makes so much sense. Your brain is getting a code red, spinning out of control signal that completely contradicts what your eyes and body are telling it.
Precisely. Now, let's look at the mechanics. How does the fluid actually trigger the hair cells inside the canal?
This is the inertia part, right? Guyton talks about the cupula.
The cupula. It's a little gelatinous sail or curtain that blocks the canal. And the hairs of the hair cells are embedded in the bottom of this sail.
So when I turn my head to the left, what happens to the fluid?
Simple physics happens, inertia. If you're holding a glass of water and you suddenly spin the glass, the water lags behind for a moment, right?
Right. It kind of sloshes against the trailing side. It wants to stay still.
Same thing inside your head. When the bone of your skull turns to the left, the endolymph fluid inside the canal lags behind. Relative to the canal it's in, it flows backward to the right.
And that backward flow of fluid pushes on the sail.
It bends the cupula, which in turn bends the hair cells embedded in it, which pulls the tip links, which opens the trapdoors.
And we're right back to the same battery and switch mechanism as hearing.
It's the exact same molecular process, but remember, this only detects acceleration, rotation. If you keep spinning at a constant speed like an ice skater, the friction in the canal eventually makes the fluid catch up. It starts spinning with your head.
The water starts moving with the glass.
And the cupula straightens back up. The signal stops.
Which explains perfectly why, if you spin around in a chair for a while and then stop suddenly, you feel like you're spinning in the opposite direction.
Yes, because when you stop your head, the fluid inside the canal keeps moving due to momentum. It sloshes forward, bending the cupula in the opposite direction. Your brain gets a powerful signal saying, whoa, we are now spinning to the right. Even though you're sitting perfectly still, that's dizziness.
Okay, so canal's rotation. What about the other sensors, the otolith organs, the utricle and the saccule?
These are for sensing linear acceleration, speeding up in a car or going up and down in an elevator, and they rely on something very simple and primitive. Tiny rocks.
Rocks in our head, you're not kidding.
Otoliths. That literally means ear stones. They're tiny crystals of calcium carbonate.
And how do they work?
Imagine a little patch of hair cells covered by a layer of gelatinous goo. And sitting on top of that goo is a heavy blanket of these otolith crystals.
Okay, so it's a top-heavy system.
Very top-heavy. Now imagine you're sitting in a car at a red light and you slam on the accelerator. Your head and body move forward. But what do those heavy little rocks want to do?
Inertia again. They want to stay put. So relative to your head, they get left behind, they slide backward.
And as they slide backward, they drag that gelatinous layer with them, which shears and bends the hair cells. The brain feels that backward drag on the hairs and interprets it as forward acceleration.
And I'm guessing gravity has the same effect.
It does. If you just tilt your head to the side, gravity pulls the heavy stones downhill, shearing the hair cells. The brain reads that constant shear force as head tilted left.
So the utricle is oriented horizontally for forward-backward motion, and the saccule is vertical for up-down.
Roughly, yes. Between the canals and the otoliths, your brain gets a constant real-time update on exactly how your head is rotating, which way is down, and how you're moving through space.
And this all feeds into one of the most important and fastest reflexes in the entire body, something we take for granted until it breaks. The VOR.
The vestibulo-ocular reflex.
Explain this magic to us.
It's incredible. Just hold your thumb out in front of you. Now, keeping your eyes locked on your thumbnail, shake your head back and forth like you're saying no. Go pretty fast.
Okay, yeah. I can still see my thumbnail perfectly clearly. It's stable.
Now, if you tried to do that while holding a video camera and shaking it, the footage would be an unwatchable, blurry mess.
Complete garbage, yeah.
The VOR is the biological Steadicam for your eyes. The absolute instant your semicircular canals detect head is beginning to turn left at 10 degrees per second, they send a signal through a super fast 3-neuron arc in the brainstem directly to your eye muscles, telling them to turn eyes right at 10 degrees per second.
It's a perfect cancellation.
A perfect one-to-one cancellation that keeps the image of the world stable on your retina.
And how fast is this reflex? Because we know visual processing itself is relatively slow.
That's the key. This reflex doesn't wait for your brain to see the blur and then correct it. It's predictive. It goes from the ear to the brainstem straight to the eye muscles. The whole loop takes about 10 milliseconds. It corrects for the motion before your visual system even knows the motion happened.
It corrects an error before the error is even perceived. That's amazing. And that leads us perfectly into our last section, part 6, when the system fails. Because when this Steadicam breaks, life gets very unpleasant very fast.
It certainly does. A great example is nystagmus.
Nystagmus, that's the jerky, involuntary eye movement, right?
Yes. If the VOR is misfiring, or if the vestibular system is sending confused or mismatched signals, the eyes will do this characteristic drift and snap movement. They'll drift slowly in one direction and then jerk quickly back.
And clinicians can actually use this diagnostically. The famous COWS mnemonic.
Cold opposite, warm same. This refers to the caloric stimulation test. It sounds a bit medieval, but you gently squirt a little water into a patient's ear canal.
Why on earth would you do that?
You're doing it to test the integrity of the brainstem. If you put cold water in the right ear, it cools the fluid in the horizontal semicircular canal on that side. Cold fluid is denser, so it sinks.
It creates a convection current.
Exactly. You create a current that flows through the canal, which bends the cupula and tricks the ear into thinking the head is spinning.
So you're basically inducing vertigo on purpose.
A very mild, controlled version, yes. And a healthy, intact brainstem will respond by making the eyes move with nystagmus. If you use cold water, the fast, jerky phase of the nystagmus beats to the opposite side. If you use warm water, it beats to the same side. See OWS. If you see that, you know the pathway from the ear to the brainstem to the eye muscles is working. If nothing happens, there's damage somewhere in that loop.
Speaking of damage, let's talk about Meniere's disease. This is such a classic pathology for this whole system.
It's a really devastating condition. It comes in attacks of severe vertigo, roaring tinnitus, and fluctuating hearing loss.
So what's actually going wrong, physically?
Remember our scala media, the special sandwich filling with the high potassium endolymph?
Yeah, the battery.
In Meniere's disease, for reasons we don't fully understand, there's a buildup of fluid pressure in that compartment. It's called endolymphatic hydrops. The whole chamber starts to balloon out, and eventually the thin membranes separating it from the other chambers can rupture.
So the special fluid leaks out and mixes with the normal fluid.
The high potassium endolymph mixes with the low potassium paralymph.
It's a short circuit.
A complete short circuit. It washes out the electrical battery of the cochlea. The hair cells either stop working entirely or they depolarize uncontrollably. So you get a sudden drop in hearing, a roaring tinnitus, and a violent attack of vertigo as the vestibular system goes haywire.
That's a terrifying failure of the system's basic chemistry.
It really highlights how critical that delicate ionic balance is.
And what about something more common, like motion sickness?
Yeah.
I mean, almost everyone has felt that at some point. It's the reading in the back of a car problem.
It's a classic sensory mismatch.
Right. My eyes are telling my brain everything is still, we are focused on this page, but my vestibular system is screaming, we are bouncing, we are turning, we are accelerating. So my brain gets two contradictory reports. But why is the response vomit? Why isn't the response just, hey, maybe stop reading?
That would be a lot more convenient, wouldn't it? But you have to think about the ancient, primitive software our brainstem is running. For millions of years of evolution, if your visual system and your vestibular system were telling you completely different stories about reality, it didn't mean you were in the back of a taxi.
It meant you ate the poisonous berries.
Precisely. It meant you were hallucinating due to neurotoxicity. A common effect of poison is to disrupt the visual or vestibular systems, creating a mismatch. So the brain's evolutionarily coded panic button for sensory conflict isn't close your eyes, it's purge the stomach now. It's trying to save your life from a poisoning that isn't actually happening.
So I get sick in the back of a car because my ancient lizard brain thinks I've been poisoned. Wonderful.
It's a potent false alarm, for sure.
Before we wrap up, we should quickly circle back to hearing loss itself. We talked about conductive loss, like the fused stapes. What about sensor neural loss?
This is often called nerve deafness, and it's usually permanent. This is when the hair cells themselves die.
And once they're gone, they're gone. They don't grow back.
Not in mammals, no. Birds and reptiles can regenerate them, which is amazing, but we can't. This happens with normal aging presbycusis, where we tend to lose the high-frequency hair cells at the base of the cochlea first. It also happens from noise damage or certain drugs.
You mentioned the antibiotics earlier.
Yes, the aminoglycoside family, like streptomycin and gentamicin. They're powerful, life-saving drugs, but they can be ototoxic. They have a nasty habit of killing off the outer hair cells first.
And for these patients, when hearing aids aren't enough, we now have cochlear implants. How do those actually work?
A cochlear implant is a truly brilliant piece of bioengineering. It's a workaround. If the hair cells are dead, you can think of the keyboard of the piano as being broken. But the strings, the auditory nerve fibers, are often still intact.
So the implant bypasses the broken keyboard and plays the strings directly.
That's a perfect analogy. The implant is a long, thin wire with a series of electrodes on it that is carefully threaded into the snail shell of the cochlea. A microphone on the outside picks up sound, a processor turns it into a pattern of electrical signals, and those signals are sent to the electrodes to directly stimulate the auditory nerve at different points along its length.
It's using the place principle.
It is hijacking the place principle. The microphone hears a high-pitched sound, send a jolt of electricity to the electrode near the base of the cochlea. Here's a low-pitched sound. Zap the electrode near the apex. It rebuilds the sound map of the world electrically, right on the nerve itself.
That is the ultimate proof that the place principle is the fundamental code of hearing. We can actually engineer a solution based on it.
It really is remarkable.
So we have covered immense amount of ground, from the thumbtack mechanics of the middle ear to the molecular trapdoors of the hair cells, from the electrical battery of the stria vascularis to the predictive Steadicam of the VOR.
It's a very dense and beautiful topic.
If you had to leave the listener with one final big thought to mull over from all of this, what would it be?
I think it would be this. We tend to think of our senses as these passive windows. We just open our eyes and see, we just hear a sound. But hearing, and especially balance, are profoundly physical, active processes. The vestibular system is the ultimate silent sense. You are never, ever aware of it when it's working.
Not until you get dizzy, at least.
Exactly. But right now, as you're sitting there, your otoliths are constantly firing to tell your brain which way gravity is pulling. Your semicircular canals are monitoring every tiny, unconscious movement of your head. Your brainstem is constantly fighting entropy and gravity to keep you anchored and stable in reality.
It's the silent anchor.
It is. We close our eyes to sleep. We can choose not to speak, but we can never close our ears. They are always on, always monitoring, always keeping us oriented in the world. It is a 204/7 thankless job that never stops until we do.
That's a heavy thought.
Yeah.
The machinery never truly rests.
Never.
Well, on that note, I think I'm going to go appreciate a moment of silence, or rather, appreciate the complex machinery that is currently humming away inside my head, allowing me to perceive that silence.
As well you should.
For those of you listening who want to see the diagrams, and trust me, you really want to see the illustrations of the traveling wave and the tip links, go check out the chapters on hearing and equilibrium in both Genong and Guyton. The visuals truly bring these mechanical concepts to life.
Especially the audiograms in Guyton. They really help you see what hearing loss looks like on paper.
Absolutely. Until the next deep dive, keep listening.
And keep your balance.